Okay, during the credit roll, I think I'll jump in because time is of the essence, and I can assure you, with 4 professors and less than 2 hours, we have a lot to share with you, so we'll try to proceed. Again, I want to express my gratitude and thanks being here at SEMA, being here. It was such a beautiful morning coming up here in the hills of southwestern Pennsylvania, being up here and knowing that through this technology we're able to bring together some of the leading art historians and I think thinkers about art in our time. And I have to say this in terms of this is so personally rewarding to spend time with colleagues and men and women whose work I have read and admired, and to be able to share that with Colleen Browning's exhibition in the 4 different venues of the Southern Alleghenies Museum, satellites of 4 institutions, 4 venues, to have this discussion. Even at breakfast this morning, it's almost as though I feel like we're a group of outliers, because there is a very problematic discussion about realist and representational art in the United States today. And there's something almost comforting. I appreciate the warmth and really the collegiality to be able to share some of these ideas. We have today 4 perspectives on Colleen Browning. And it makes perfect sense that this location, SEMA, is really a place that has given real nurturing to the topic and to the discussion of American art. And I think that its placement perhaps out of Manhattan, its placement out in the context of the United States gives us an idea that this museum, and I say this quite seriously, has become a mecca, really. If we think of the meccas of what it would be representational or realist or magic realist art in America, the mecca is not Saudi Arabia or Jerusalem or Assisi, but it's here in Loretto, Pennsylvania. I consider this, for many years doing my research on American realism and American magic realist art, I kept coming up to seeing the publications here at SEMA during Michael Struber's directorship during those 25 years, and I realized that something very important was taking place here. The project of working on Colleen Browning, of course, was another wave or another level of that discussion, and in many ways it was, for an art historian, almost the perfect situation. I felt this was right in my wheelhouse, so to speak, through the diligence of the attorneys representing the estate of Jeffrey Wagner. I had the privilege to enter into this sealed apartment on the Upper West Side near Columbia University, in Morningside Heights, and with Batya Levin, and under the guidance of attorney Eleanor Jackson Peel, we realized that this apartment was almost this place where all the puzzles of the life of Colleen Browning would be revealed. It was, I think, like walking into I'm not going to say a crime scene, but it reminded me of, I felt like I was Kojak or on CSI or Columbo. I was walking into a place filled with mysteries. Every drawer, every box we opened, we found more and more, brought everything here, shipped everything out here to Loretto, but it all began there in January of 2008. Quickly, we began to see that she arrived in 1949 in Manhattan. She arrived on the Queen Elizabeth, and almost right out of the starting gate, she made a remarkable impact, almost to the point where she was frightened by the velocity of her of her fame. She even stopped painting for a few months to catch her breath because her first great show at the Edwin Hewitt Gallery was acclaimed in Time and Newsweek and all the major art press. We heard the quote of John Cannaday, who really was a very important role. I mean, he was sort of lording over the art page of the New York Times in that period and saying she is an artist of incredible skill and talent. She could do anything she wants. You know, we have to, as art historians, we have to really look and step back over the entire 20th century and understand. Some of you might recognize this is the famous chart of Alfred Barr, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, that he created in 1936. And it's a chart showing the movements and the styles going back to Impressionism and Neo-Impressionism, Fauvism, Cubism, and then what happened when the art styles moved to the American scene. My central focus in looking at Colleen Browning was mid-century, was what happened, this pivot in her life and in American art at mid-century. And you see it almost in these front pages of major publications. Thomas Hart Benton, who will be certainly the preeminent expert, is my colleague and friend, Henry Adams. Here, the cover of Time magazine in 1934 is Tom Benton. In 1949, Life magazine asked, is he the greatest living painter in the United States? Jackson Pollock. And by 1968, Art for Money's Sake. That pivot, that switch, I believe, really caused a tremendous change in terms of what I call the swept away, the hurricane that blew through and blew across the American art world in the 1940s and 50s. I gave a talk out at the Pollock Krasner House 2 years ago, and the wonderful lady out there, Helen Harrison, I said, well, it was like they were all swept away. These artists who, many of them, had major coverage, major attention, and it's as though they were blown off out to sea. Artists that only the tiniest group of critics or scholars would be working on today: Priscilla Warren Roberts, Isabel Bishop, Bernard Carafal. Now, I want to be very clear. I totally embrace and understand the agenda of abstraction and avant-gardism. It's not that I'm fighting that. I'm not here. I remember Henry once said to us, we're not Philistines. We're not Philistines. I get it. And I certainly understand that if we look at the art world of 1949-50, during the great breakthrough of Pollock and de Kooning, they moved the agenda forward. I'm concerned with these men and women who were essentially, as the art world shifted, as we see here, it was in this painting of Mark Tansey, The Triumph of the New York School, where the art world is shifting so that it is the new group of artists and critics of the action painting. We have Clement Greenberg and Harold Rosenberg and Barnett Newman and Mark Rothko and de Kooning and Pollock as GIs taking over from the French troops of the first half of the century. It is a question of zeitgeist that Barnett Newman would say in an interview to Rodman Selden. It will be 1,000 years before we see representational painting reappear. Within 1 or 2 years, suddenly American art changed so dramatically that here's a Schlitz beer ad from 1952, and the educated couple is looking at, note, abstract painting. There's a great scene in last season of Mad Men when they're in Mr. Cooper's office trying to understand this new type of abstract painting. Museums, curators, writers make decisions in terms of the placement. And as a schoolboy, I used to go to the Museum of Modern Art. My favorite painting on the wall was Christina's World. If you visit MoMA today, you'll see that it has been relegated to almost an peripheral edge near the coffee shop up in a section of the museum. And when I asked Glenn Lowry, the director, he said, well, Philip, it just doesn't work with the narrative. And that narrative that these artists were somehow, recently in his article in the American Art Review, Henry writes, they were representing banality or sentimentality. This, I think 40, 50 years later, we have an opportunity to clear out the brush, understand that this rewriting of history is essential, that we can, I think, create a new type of art history that embraces and reconciles these movements.